Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Family Protection Association and Survival Life podcast, where we're interviewing experts and finding out what you can do to better protect yourself and your family. I'm Matthew Ashton. Here with me today is Joshua Enyart, the Grey Bearded Green Beret. Josh is a survival expert and instructor with the Pathfinder School and has a wonderful YouTube channel that I've been a fan of for a long time. We're really lucky to have him on the podcast. I was shocked we were able to get him. So it's wonderful to have you here, Josh. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's I'm new to the podcasting world. I actually just started listening to like my first ones a couple of weeks ago, and I've been binge listening. All my hours on the road were normally spent, just kind of silence and thinking,
Sometimes that's good for you. I've unplugged a few times because you just need that space.
Yeah, but I'm really intrigued by this kind of the podcasting thing, and I'm really excited to hear this and go back and binge listen to your guys' stuff as well. So appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, it's really great. We are just re-kicking this off. So you are episode 3 of our newest episodes that we've got coming out.
Nice.
I did just join Survival Life in the FPA about a month and a half ago, and I wanted to bring this back. It's a great opportunity for us to reach out to people who are really good. We do have a pretty good following of Survival Life, so I was like, let's expose them to some people that I've basically grown up watching. I mean, I've watched you for a couple years. I've watched the other Pathfinder instructors. So I'm like, I want more people to know about you guys. I wanted to give you guys that opportunity to tell people what you're about, what you're doing, and really just, this whole thing is survival life and Family Protection Association's prepping. So it all kind of falls in together within the realm of what you do.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of my thing is, the survival side of it. And it's, my approach to survival is not what a lot of people think it is. Like a lot of people think, if you're out backpacking or hiking and you bust an ankle or get lost, you were still out backpacking to hiking. You still have a backpack full of gear. It's not like you chuck that over the mountain and go to sticks and stones because this is survival now. I got to get rid of all this stuff. Like I'm a be prepared first and then be prepared to find yourself completely unprepared kind of guy. Like this is what you should pack for every time you go out. And, if something happens, if you can prevent the situation altogether, you don't need all the other stuff, the bow drills, the debris huts, like all that is a primitive backup to being prepared from the start, and then kind of my military background, I've just kind of translated that into kind of my own system of preparedness, and that revolves around PACE plans, which we learned in the military. The primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. Like primary, of course, is the bug in because everybody's already doing that. It's your most comfortable place. You've got the most supplies. You don't have to walk to get there. Like that's the primary plan for everyone. But there are situations where that isn't an option. So the alternate plan is, bugging out, but you're bugging out with a vehicle, but you have a place to go. Contingency is you're bugging out. Maybe you don't have a vehicle, can't use the vehicle for the roads are blocked. And, you have an alternate bug out location, but you have to go by foot, so there's routes to that. There's planning that goes to that. And then emergency is like what everybody thinks of when they think of bug out is, if I'm going to grab this bag, I'm going to head out into the wilderness and live the rest of my life. That's like way down the list of priorities for me. I want to kind of develop the skills to be able to do that, but I don't ever want to do that.
Absolutely not. That certainly definitely makes sense. And we actually, a couple episodes ago, we were visiting with the guy who wrote essentially a post-apocalyptic series, and he talks about a very similar thing, where it's actually just people trying to get home from a terrorist attack that took out a bunch of gas stations and gas refineries. And so he forgot to fuel up his car. So he got as far as he could in the car, but eventually had to get out of the car with the gear and everything he had to try to get home. But the emphasis, again, like you said, is actually technically bugging in, because he's more trying to get home to bug in with his family during the crisis.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be the conventional wisdom that I see everywhere, that I'm grabbing a bag and leaving for good. Like what pushed you out of there, and how far you get a safe distance away from whatever that was, think about that.
Very, very, very much so. And it's interesting that, I've watched a lot of your different videos, things you do, and you do tend to come across a bit more military to me, which I certainly appreciate. And I was wondering about that in terms of your training. You mentioned you are a Green Beret, which is part of your channel name, but you're also a Ranger. How much of that training portrays into what you do now, how you teach? Like, how does that affect what you do?
I think honestly it started well before that, and like the reason I wanted to be a ranger and a Green Beret later on in life is because I had a childhood that was basically immersed in the forest. And you know, I mean, we lived typically, but I had access to a lot of land, a lot of forest. So I grew up in Southern Ohio near where the school is, the Pathfinder School now. But those were my stomping grounds growing up, and I grew up, you know, out in the forest, Shawnee Forest actually. So I lived kind of in a very rural village. Like the closest village was 15 minutes away that had 100 people in it, and then everybody else was scattered to the Appalachian foothills. And you know, that type of community and that environment, you know, everybody knew who everybody was, everybody waved when you drove by. There were no fences except to keep cattle and horses in. So, you know, we could go outside, and I grew up on 5 acres, but that 5 acres was attached to, you know, thousands of acres of forest, and everybody's property was like, nobody cared where the kids went. We would go outside and we wouldn't come in until it was dark. So my entire childhood was immersed in that type of thing, and I was just piddling around in the woods, you know, and I got a hold of an old, you know, Army survival manual and would try to do all the skills in there, like self-teach, you know, and it was cool, you know, but I always wanted that. That was something I was really interested in. I thought I'd actually get more survival training in the military. But what I did learn is that, you know, only certain people get to go to SEER school, and I didn't get to go to SEER school until I was going to the SFQ course later on.
That was going to be my question, is if you went through SEER school.
Yeah, it's part of it was part of the SEER. The SEER was part of the qualification course pipeline when I went through. So everybody that I went through with, that was part of our Q course, and it didn't used to be that way. People had to kind of go back, you know, once they were already qualified Green Berets, they'd go back to it. But now it's part of the actual qualification course. So all, you know, I guess modern, I went in 2004. So I guess it's not all that modern. That's not all that recent anymore. You know, those guys are getting up in their careers. But yeah, it's what SEER did was give me a taste of survival skills, but it's a very small part because it's survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. So you get a taste of survival, you get a taste of evasion, a taste of resistance, and you don't get to escape. You just, the course ends, you know. So the emphasis was more on that, like the prisoner of war type thing, in different environments, different situations. So I got a small taste of the survival aspect, but I wouldn't say that it necessarily prepared me for, you know, life as this type of instructor. But, you know, my training was focused on, like all of us, our training was focused on small unit tactics and, you know, unconventional warfare, language training, and then, you know, kind of what your job was within that team. And my particular job was a weapons specialist. So that's what I did. I did foreign weapons, I did domestic weapons, I did mortars, I did rockets, I did everything that basically sent something downrange at the bad guys. Like I was the guy that was in charge of maintaining that, fixing that, understanding how they work, operating them to a large extent, training other folks how to use those. So if it prepared me in any way, it prepared me by making me a better instructor. And then I think for the Green Beret aspect, what makes us unique is that language training, and that what we do is train indigenous folks. You know, we train them technically in a language that's not our native tongue by any means. So I think the ability to simplify instructions and do a lot more hands-on kind of demo and get someone that doesn't speak the same language as you to understand, I think that is actually what, you know, what better prepared me for being a survival instructor on the outside. And then kind of the career path, which made sense to me, is the career path was, you know, Rangers and then Green Berets, and then afterwards it's like, okay, now what am I going to do? Well, I kind of had to look back on what my career was, which was weapons, and it's like, you know, that's not really applicable when you get out, you know.
It's really not, unless you're in military or in police force, something like that, and that's about the only use for that, really.
Yeah, and it's so what I did gain from it that was applicable was, you know, I was always interested in the medical side of things. And I was really interested in diving deeper into the survival side of things. And I was basically a career instructor, you know, in different ways, different aspects, you know, some professional instructor, you know, dedicated instructor positions, and some positions were just, that was my job, was to teach indigenous folks, you know, how to use certain things that they had in their inventory. So I think that's how it prepared me, but I really think it all started, you know, back when I was a kid running around the forest, and it just kind of, you know, that's all I knew. And then it's after I get out of the military, it's like, okay, well, now what? Well, it's either medical or it's survival. Which one do you want to do? You know, and I kind of do both.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an overlap there.
Yeah.
I grew up very similar to that. I grew up in a rural town in Wyoming, actually. So 6,000 feet of elevation. Nearest Walmart's 2 hours away. The nearest Walmart is still 2 hours away 30 years later. So I actually just went home for the first time in 11 years, and it's still just as rural. Driving around, I had a lot of the same memories that you did, you know, just walking off into the woods and nobody really knew what you're doing. You crossed farmers' fences, nobody really cared because you're just kids out there playing. I think in middle school, I picked up the survival manuals. I went through all scouts. So I had a lot of that same background, you know, just kind of self-educate, figure it out, having fun. So that's very, very cool. So you've got a great YouTube channel that I've been a big fan of. What do you think separates you? Because there's different Pathfinder instructors. There's different survivalists. There's different people there. You tend to approach it a little bit more practically, I think. I've been a big fan of like your ultralight bug out bag, and that was actually a video I really liked watching. You talked about wearing different clothes, so you're not out there in camouflage. You're actually out there in clothes that would work in both environments. So what do you think it does as far as like separating you from everybody else in terms of just your style, your thought process, your philosophy on survival?
I think probably what separated, and actually my YouTube channel was an accident, and that video was never supposed to be posted, by the way. But if that's one of the first ones you saw me when I had no subscribers, you know, 500 subscribers.
It was a great video.
And it came out and kind of took off, but that was an accident, which is another story. If you want to get into, we can. But I think the difference for me is I was never a product of the industry, and I'm by no means saying that everyone in the industry is bad or what they're saying is wrong. It's just that I wasn't developed by them. Everything that I know is basically my experiences in the military that I've then kind of came out and kind of tailored and adapted those to my situation as a civilian now, and then figuring out, you know, kind of my twist on what things are. And my thing is also very my wife and I are both biology majors, you know, so it's very important to me that, you know, I can't just regurgitate something that's not in my bones. I have to try it for myself. I have to know exactly why it works before I'll put information out, and I think, you know, maybe that's a step that folks are losing, that whole process of making sure everything that I say is as accurate as it possibly can be, because I think that being an instructor is a huge responsibility. And I think a lot of other folks do, but I think there is a tendency sometimes, from what I'm seeing, for people to just, you know, hey, somebody said this, so this is now how it is, and I'm just going to spread it like wildfire. And that's where you see, you know, crazy stuff, you know, kind of making its way into the industry. But I think I'm very careful with that. I think I'm very careful with, you know, it's humbling to go from basically 500 followers to, you know, 150,000 in just a couple of years. And it was completely accidental. I couldn't duplicate it. I don't know how it happened. But I go out there and I enjoy myself, and I'm putting out information that I know is true, because it's humbling to me to have that many people interested in what I'm doing and interested in what I'm saying and teaching. So I take that as kind of a responsibility. Like, these are like, everyone's kind of like, you know, the people that are trying to learn from me and looking to learn from me. And for me as an instructor, that's a really important thing, is to deliver good information that's duplicatable by them, that gets them success. So I don't know that the other channels do that. I don't watch a whole lot of folks. I do watch some folks. It's just, I don't have a lot of time.
Right.
But, you know, there's some great channels out there besides mine, of course. And then, you know, I kind of accidentally got hooked up into the Pathfinder thing. You know? So it's kind of like this perfect storm of accidents that got me where I am today. And I'm really thankful for it. But what I think I'm most thankful for is the number of people that put their trust in what I'm saying. And they trust my endorsements. They trust that I've spent 4 to 6 months in the field using that item before it even makes it to my channel. You know, they trust that I'm not ever going to take paid endorsements or, you know, gear in exchange for a video. You know, they know I'm not going to do that. And I think I've been very protective of that following, that trust and that kind of, that rapport that I have with the folks that do choose to watch me. So, you know, it keeps growing, but, you know, like I said, it's completely accidental. 500 subscribers at the time. I was working for another company called, I don't know if I can say the name, but Prepper Advantage. They basically, I had a government job, was contracted for MARSOC. So I was teaching Marine Special Operations Command, doing ground warfare, sniper training, doing all that stuff. Just another instructor job, you know, which is the good thing about being an instructor is you can apply it to so many different templates, and it's just, you know, delivering information to where people can understand it, which I've done for such a long time now. But they basically offered me, you know, I was making videos for them for their channel, and it was run by a marketing team. They didn't have any experience whatsoever in this kind of this market, this industry. So they were basically pulling in a bunch of experts to do stuff for them. And then they're like, you know, your videos do really well. You know, we'd really like to, you know, basically hire you full time. What would it take for you to leave your job? And I was like, well, it'd take this amount of money and benefits, you know, because that's why I have this job, you know.
Right.
And that whole time I was building my own brand on the side, but, you know, it wasn't going anywhere. It was a lot of work. But that was my 9 to 5 was working for MARSOC, and then my 5 to 10, you know, was working for myself, trying to make this thing work. But they basically said, hey, we'll give you that and just make videos for us, you know. Okay. That lasted a month and a half after I left my government position.
Oh, that's rough.
They basically pulled the plug on their own company. And actually, I've got a lot of videos on their channel that doesn't actually have a company behind it anymore. They're just still on YouTube. They never took it down. I got some of the same videos on my own channel, and they're doing better on their channel. Which
interesting.
There's not even a company that exists there. But anyway.
That's
so
strange.
I accidentally, you know, they basically pulled the plug, and I was like, oh crap, you know, I don't have a job now. So I had another buddy who was into that, and he's like, you know, if you want to do a project for us, we can work on marketing it for you, and you know, we can start getting some income back for you. So I made that whole bug out series, you know, the bug out backpacking list. I made like how to do the shelter and the knots. I made water procurement. I made, you know, like the whole series of this is what's in the bag, and then following videos of how to use everything in it.
Right.
And I got that done for them. And it was about a week of solid 12 to 16-hour days of work, you know, self-film, self-edited, all that. And then that company called me back and they're like, hey, you know, just keep making videos exclusive for us, you know, even though we don't exist, we still want to pay you, you know, because we feel really bad. And I'm like, well, are you going to do anything with the videos? And I'm like, well, no, but just keep making them so we have a reason to pay you. And I'm like, all right. So I had to call the other guys back.
It's an interesting job.
I was like, these guys are, you know, I don't know what's going on. I was like, but I can't give you those videos because technically I'm exclusive to them. The only thing I can put this on is my YouTube channel. It's like, but don't worry about it. I don't have a following. So if they pull the plug again, then you guys can just pull in and grab those. I was like, but I don't want to waste all that effort. So I'm just going to put them up on my YouTube channel. It'll be fine. And then next thing I know, it took off. And I think it's pushing, you know, 3 million views now, which means that, you know, kind of my kind of thought process behind preparedness might resonate with a lot more people than I thought, but it was a complete accident, you know, but that's where everything came from.
I think it definitely does. I mean, I really appreciate the style you bring to it. It's very simple, it's very direct, and it's very, very practical. And that's something, one of the things that in talking with you and with your company and everything, you guys are coming out with some new videos talking a bit more of a practical approach to things versus some of the more conventional wisdom that is not actually really accurate or necessary anymore. Like it's just a bad way of approach. And so tell us a little bit about like these upcoming videos you've got coming out. You guys just got back from a trip out filming everything. Tell us a little bit more about kind of what these are going to be, what they're going on, what your philosophy was in taking them on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I got linked up with the Survival Summit, which I was a fan of theirs. I had videos from an instructor friend of mine. It's one of my favorite survival instructors, Kirsten Recknitz. She did a survival HD film with them, and it was extremely well made, extremely well produced. So I kind of knew who Survival Summit was. I was getting all their DVDs. I think I had all their DVDs. Jack Richland from Black Scout has a good series on there. There's a bunch of them that I carry on my website as well. People that I've seen that I'm like, yeah, I can get behind what these folks are saying. And they approached me after I kind of started doing the wilderness medical stuff on, I was trying to find a different platform than YouTube to put this out, because putting out medical information online to free to the public is like, oh, that's kind of a liability thing. Like, that's like, I might as well go do an edible mushroom video, you know.
I am not a doctor. I do not approve your use of this video.
Yeah, so I kind of started producing it, and I started I jumped on the Thinkific platform because I didn't really like Patreon and kind of their policies. So I was like, well, maybe this Thinkific is a distance learning center, and I can, you know, pump videos on there. I put one video up, and then somebody from Survival Summit saw it, and they immediately called me and was like, hey, we're looking for a guy to do a wilderness medical film for us. So I agreed to do that, and then we kind of have had a relationship since then. We produced, I think, these last two. We did Into the Woods down in Florida. We also did Wilderness Medical, which is a very comprehensive wilderness medical film, very long, a lot of detailed information. So we did those two 6 months ago, I think, 3 months ago, something like that. It was this year, right? That's what I remember. And then this time we did kind of continuing that Into the Woods series because people really liked it. It's more, you know, kind of skills and context. It's more me being out in the woods and just.
I remember some clips from that. That was a really good one. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to make. So we went to the Ozarks with the intent of, you know, basically I'm up in upstate New York and Adirondacks, and the film crew's down in Florida. So there was a 2-week quarantine if he would have came up here, and I didn't really want to go back down to Florida, and you know, the resources are not the same as they are up here.
The Everglades would be very different.
Yeah, that would be different. Yeah, so it's like, well, the kind of the middle ground is my buddies, Matt Tate down in American Survival Company and Salvo Security Training. They're down in Arkansas, and I've used their venue before, and he's just like, you know, no notice, open the doors, you know, and we went down there and filmed. So that's why I ended up being down there. But our main film that we wanted to film was basically, I want to kind of the Bug Out 2.0, like the ultralight Bug Out 2.0 version. I've done a lot of updates for my own gear, my own stuff over the last 2 years since I released the original video. And the original video was kind of it was kind of a watered down version of my system that was meant to be for someone else, you know, that they were going to use it for their own purposes. And it ended up being, you know, kind of what I became, at least half of my subscribers, that's what I became known for, was that. And it's not something I ever really wanted to do. I didn't want to put all my stuff out on the street like this.
Right.
Know? But it resonated with so many people, you know. It's like, all right, well, let me deliberately make this into a system that people can follow, because people are like, well, you know, that bug out bag's not practical for the winter. Right. You know, it's a baseline.
Wasn't meant to be. Yeah. Absolutely not.
It's possible for me to put together a checklist for you to use that's applicable to every single environment, all weather conditions. Like, that's not possible. No. The takeaway is these are the needs that you're providing for, no matter what your bag is, no matter what your situation is, no matter what your environment is, your weather condition, no matter what season, it's still core temperature control, it's hydration, it's calorie consumption, you know, it's all of those are the same, you know. So that's the baseline. That was the takeaway. But, you know, the takeaway for a lot of people was, hey, I need a checklist of the gear. It's like, all right, well, here's a checklist of the gear, but you need to tailor it, you know.
Yeah, for me, what I got out of it was actually your rules. So when you were talking, you know, your bag should be no more than 10 to 20% of your body weight. Like, I've gone hiking with bags that I loaded down with all kinds of gear thinking this will be really cool, and it sucked hiking with them. Yeah. So rules like that, like keep your body weight down or your bag weight down. That was the attraction for me in something like that. And then where you were talking about, you know, making sure, I mean, if you're talking bug out, you may very likely, even if you get out in the woods, you're still going to have to interact with the city, with people. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about, you know, having a bag that was, not camo, not military, not all super, I forget what the word is, but has all the molly webbing on it.
Yeah, it's all tactical and tactical.
Yeah, not having a tactical bag because it makes you stand out. I was like, I like that attitude and the aspect of thinking that way much more than I've never been a list guy. Growing up in Scouts, we actually made fun of, there was a kid who called our scout leader and said, do you have a checklist of what I need to go on scout camp? And he did get made fun of for about a month and a half because we were just like, it's a camp. If you don't have it, you're going to live without it. We're there for a week. You'll be fine.
Yep. Yeah, I think that was kind of the thing that we wanted to capture. Was I wanted to give a better glimpse of the entire system and how everything works together. And you'd be like, yeah, the reason I can carry an 18-pound bug out bag, or now a 19-pound, I added some stuff.
Yeah, gotta add some toys.
Now it's 19 pounds, but it's still less than 10% of my body weight, and
that's a very lightweight. Yeah,
I can move with that for long periods of time and long distances, and it barely puts a dent in me. And it doesn't increase my need for calorie consumption. It doesn't increase my need for hydration, because I'm loaded down like a pack mule, carrying all these comforts that I'm not ever going to need. Do
you think some of that comes from your Green Beret training? Because I know I looked at getting into the military, and I looked at the different training and their physical requirements, and the Green Berets seem to do more walking than freaking anybody else out there. And so I was like, that's a long time to be carrying a lot of gear.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have got themselves fooled. You can pack all your fears and pack all your comfort, and then you end up with 75 pounds on your back, which is great if it sits in a corner, or it sits in the car, or it sits in the garage, and you've never actually put it on and gone anywhere, or you're walking flat terrain, But if you put on 75 to 100 pounds and walk any distance under stress,
you're not going to make it 3 miles.
You're not going very far, and you've made it harder than it needs to be, and you're carrying a lot of stuff that you're not ever going to need. So I wanted to kind of, I think folks are kidding themselves, and the fact that I've carried, our baseline rucksack in selection was 65 pounds without our water and our MREs. So you couldn't count that as your weight, because that was consumable. You had to have 65 pounds minimum at the end of every march, and you didn't know how far it was. It was all kinds of psychological stuff, but you had to basically take out all your water, and we carried, I think, at least 1.5 gallons of water. So there's another 16 to 20 pounds of water and food.
Right.
That didn't count towards that 65 pounds. So basically it's 85 pounds, you might as well say, and you're going to ruck, through deep sand for as long as they say, just keep going until you see the finish line.
Brutal.
You don't know the standards. You don't know how far it is. So you can't pace yourself. You just give it all you got. And that's the way it is. And then I thought that was heavy. That's like a lot of weight. Like in the Rangers, our baseline was more 35 pounds, and then you add things. And of course, combat loads are a lot heavier, because you need more ammo and such. But for training, we rarely went over 35 to 50 pounds in the Rangers, but we ran most of that. It was a lot faster pace, I think, and it was less cross country. But when I get into SF later on, I'm an older man by then, and we go to Robin Sage, which is an incredibly, it's just an incredible experience. That's where you learn unconventional warfare, and it's just a really good experience. So you basically, I remember being the team sergeant, during training. I was the team sergeant for that. So I had the lightest ruck, and my rucksack was actually 125 pounds. So we did a night jump, and you basically are I don't want to give too much of it away, but you do a jump in, and then you do a long cross-country movement to link up with indigenous forces, and you continue the training from there. So it was about a 20-kilometer cross-country movement at night with a 125-pound ruck. And you made it that night. It was not slow. It was not light. But this is when I'm in my peak physical condition.
Right.
So having done that before and actually been through that, the biggest takeaway from that is I don't want to do that again. I don't have to.
Right.
And of course, we carried a lot in combat. We carried a lot of heavy loads, and it's just I've done it enough to know that that's not what I want to do. And honestly, if you build your skill level up enough, you'll learn to find natural resources and supplement everything. So the more you know, the less you carry, kind of thing, from the late Morris Kohansky is absolute truth. But then at the same time, I think that folks, they do pack their fears. They do like to kind of keep those modern comforts with them as long as they can. So they pack ridiculous things that they're never going to need. There's so many things I see in these bug out bags that are just gee whiz, good idea fairies, like flying around, like giving you all these ideas, like, hey, you should pack this, you should pack this shovel. Like, you're not going to dig a hole, you need to be running, you should pack all these conibear traps. I've got 10 conibears. Like, I run a trap line. Like I put a trap in, it's 3 days before I get anything almost every time.
Exactly.
So that means if I put a trap out, I tied myself to an area. I'm not bugging out. You're sitting in the woods. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That makes a really good point about some of those gear. People don't think about that. I certainly wouldn't have thought of that. You did bring up an interesting point too, though, that the heavier your gear was, like you got in really good shape, and while you didn't want to haul it, I feel like that's something a lot of survival instructors, I've never seen anybody actually talk about it, is the fitness to survive. I mean, we've got an epidemic of people gaining weight in the country right now. You ask them to put on any backpack, even a 20-pound one, and hike 3 miles, a lot of people probably would have a harder time doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
So
I think a lot of folks, again, have convinced themselves, and I'm probably guilty of it too. You know, I'm not in the shape that I was, 10 years ago. But, I still get out there and still get after it, but it's with a much lighter weight. But, we see it at our courses a lot. We see folks that, we say in the course description, 3 to 5 miles, 35 pounds of gear, we have a whole train up, to get folks ready for that. And we'll still have folks come out that, for whatever reason, life was happening and they didn't get a chance to really do it, but they've got themselves convinced that they're still in the condition they were 20 years ago when they were in the military, and they come out and within a mile, on relatively flat terrain, walking extremely slow, talking about plants and trees, they're about to tap out, or they do tap out and they go home, because reality is that they've been on the couch so long that they can no longer carry 35 pounds for over a mile, on flat terrain, let alone under stress, so I think that's an eye opener for them. I think it's hopefully at least a wake up call for them to, you need to kind of keep yourself in reasonable shape, because you can say, a lot of folks they'll kind of set on this one plan to where I'm going to bug in, and if that doesn't work, I'll just die in a pile of brass. And like, you're already doing that. Like, aside from the brass, you're already bugged in, you're already living. Like, that's the absence.
yeah,
That is the absence of a plan. Like,
exactly.
I'm here until something happens that I can't any longer. And when I can't any longer, I'm going to die here. Like, that's not preparedness. That's the opposite of preparedness.
No, you need plan A, B, C, and all the way to Z if you have to.
Yep, definitely. So anyway, circling back to what I was trying to get to before was this film series that we worked on down in the Ozarks. This first one is it's a revisit of the bug out bag. So it's kind of like the Green Beret's ultralight bug out bag 2.0 version. Like, this is my most updated one. This is, what I've done to my bags for those folks that know what the original one was. And for people that don't know, maybe they're getting into preparedness, they're new to preparedness, or they want to see a different take on some of the conventional wisdom that's out there. This is what that's for. And how it works into the larger system, rather than just a bag. Like, that bag would never work for me. Like, okay, understand that the reason I can carry that is because I have a system of caches in place. These are the types of caches I have. And this is what I pack in them. These are some ideas. These are some things you need to think about in your planning. But it's really heavy on planning. It's really heavy on, things to think about as far as principles and concepts and how this whole big system works. And I think that if people understand the bigger picture of how that bug out bag, it's not just the bag. You can't just have the bag, So again, it does still have the flavor of, this is the bag, this is what I put in it, these are the needs I'm trying to provide for. This is where it fits in that larger plan, my PACE plan. And then of course, how to use that stuff, just like we did before on our YouTube channel. So that's really what this one is. And this is part 1. So I want to do a preparing your home film, like home preps. Like, we'll see how far into homesteading it goes, but it's basically, how to provide for your needs in your home, how to better prepare your home for a longer term type thing.
That's a rabbit hole you can go down for a really long time.
It can get crazy, so it's how to better prepare your home is one that I want to do, but that's really the one that's kind of the bigger project.
Right.
It's a lot more to get in, and that's a primary plan, so I would have done that one first, but I just think that it's easier for someone to put a bag together and get a plan than it is to prepare your home with all this different things. So I want to save that one. Another film I'm going to do is vehicle bug out, how to prepare your vehicle, how to set up like an off-grid bug out or alternate bug-in location, I guess would be the right term for it. If you get blown out of your house, where are you going, kind of thing. Like, don't just run out in the woods, with a bag. That's silly.
I just drive around because you don't know where to go.
Yeah, like I guess I go until I run out of gas. Like, where are you going? You know?
Yeah, that's certainly a problem. That's fascinating. You're taking on all these problems, and I do agree with you that while your primary plan is your home, it does make sense to do them in order of kind of projects because it's going to be easier for somebody to put together a bag than it is prep their home.
Yeah, I think that's the point I kind of made at the end of this film was, you know, this bug out bag should be, you know, it should be a last resort. Obviously, you don't want to leave your home if you don't have to. That's what we're doing during this pandemic is we're all bugged in to some degree, you know. So, but the thing is my pace plan is, you know, 3 out of the 4 plans include that bag. You know?
Right.
If you have that bag and you have a pace plan, you know, 4 different plans, you plan for contingencies, you've thought of them, you've rehearsed them. If you have that, you're more prepared than most people, I think. And it's an easy way to get started. So that's why I kind of started with that. And then I think it's an easy transition for someone that's seen kind of my series, or at least the bug out bag film on YouTube, to kind of see, hey, this is the new version. Oh, by the way, let me tell you the rest of the story here. And the other 2 films that we plan on doing with the alternate bug-in location and prepping your home will all kind of be packaged into a series once they're all complete. It's just they're you know, we get 1 film a quarter done, sometimes 2 films a quarter. And
that's still impressive. That's still a lot of work.
Yeah. So basically, my entire system is going to be on this series of films, the 3 films. So right now, the first one is basically just preparing that bag and getting a plan. You know, setting up caches is another part of that. So I think that's a really important place to start for folks. And I think, you know, it's definitely not the conventional wisdom within the industry. You know, you've probably seen it. You know, there's a lot of heavy bags. There's the whole inch bag concept, you know, which is insane to me. I think that's a pretty interesting marketing thing to get you to buy, you know, different versions of the same gear. But like to me, the inch concept, you know, I'm never coming home is kind of like, you know, it's a very, from what I'm understanding, from what I'm reading, it's a very heavy tool laden bag because you're going to go out. That's what you're going to live off of for the rest of your life. You're going to go somewhere and hack out a cabin in the forest, you know, and get your Jeremiah Johnson on, grow your beard, you know, that kind of thing. But here's the thing is, like, if you actually sat down and looked at your plan, you pulled out a map and did a reconnaissance of your area, like, you can probably bet that whatever pushed you out of your primary home, if you only go, say, 25 miles, then you probably haven't gotten very far from whatever that danger was. You know,
it's probably still coming for you for the most part.
Further. So what's the minimum safe distance? You know, how far do you have to get away from the X to feel safe that you could hack out another homestead, basically? And then, you know, say it's 100 miles. You know, how long is it going to take you to walk 100 miles with a 75 to 80 pound pack? You know, a 100-pound pack. And then when you get there, you know, do you have the skills to build a cabin? Do you have the skills to build long-term shelter, long-term survival? Do you have all that? And if not, why didn't you just figure out where a good location would be that you could possibly do that, and maybe set a cache up there? Maybe go put a cabin there now, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, it doesn't make sense for me to carry, you know, all these Pioneer tools for 100 miles when I know there's no place within that 100-mile sector that I could possibly build anything with it. So why not just put it where you're going and carry a light bag to get there? You know, so it's just different ways of looking. You're skinning the same cat, but it just makes more sense to me to have stuff where I'm going when I know I'm not going to need it right now. I don't have to carry it through that area.
That does make a lot more sense. I mean, if you have the ability to cache it and do things like that, that's certainly. And I know there's a lot of people up in like places like Alaska where it's still very frontiersy that they do that. They set up caches knowing, you know, hey, we like camping in this area, but rather than having to bring all our gear out every time, we're going to bring some stuff out, build a cache. We're going to drop a bunch of stuff here. So every time we come out, it's there.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a smarter approach because, I mean, even if you looked at where your home is now and you drew a 100-meter radius circle around that, you can look at that and you're going to see population centers, you're going to see roads, you're going to see urban areas, you're going to see what woodlands you have available within that 100 miles. And like, okay, well, I could only ever build a cabin in these 2 places. Let me get in my car, you know, while I'm not under stress.
Right.
Let me go look at that and see if, you know, there's a place I could cache some stuff.
You can always call it your fishing cabin or something to have an excuse and a justification to use it in the meantime.
Yeah, that's what it should be, you know. And then, you know, with the alternate bug-in location thing, you know, kind of to touch on that, you know, a lot of folks think it's always an end of the world thing, you know, and it's not. You know, I've got a medical kit in my bag and a bug out bag, you know. I call it a bug out bag, but it's just a go bag. You know, it just has supplies in there that I've used, you know, when I come across the scene of an accident. I'm the first one there. I've got some trauma supplies there. You know, it's still my go bag, but it doesn't mean that, you know, it's not a break glass in case of emergency kind of thing. Like, well, this isn't really the end of the world, so I'm going to let that bag gather dust kind of thing. You know, it's terrorist attacks, it's crime, it's active shooters. There's a number of things that could push you from your point to, you know, a safe distance away. And it's never a total collapse. You know, it's all these pockets of collapse, and you just need to get a safe distance away from that. You know, that's what this is for to me.
Very much so. And actually in that book, I just finished his first book. He has 7 of them. In his second book, he talks about that. He goes, you know, it's not the end of the world, even when the terrorist attacks in America feels like it's the end of the world, because you got no power, no gas. It's going to feel like the apocalypse. He goes, that was just America that was attacked. The rest of the world has power, electricity still going on. We've seen this with places like Haiti or Puerto Rico. I think Puerto Rico is still struggling to get power into certain places. So it's emergency disasters. There was the fires in Australia earlier this year that if those fires were coming towards your house, you did have to get out of there. And it's not the end of the world, but it would be nice to have a plan to get yourself away from raging bushfires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you live on the Atlantic coast, you know, having a plan to get away from a hurricane. You know, we were down in North Carolina 3 years and ran from 2 hurricanes. You know, we went up to a cabin in rural West Virginia, you know, safe from the storm on the other side of the Appalachians, away from the storm, you know.
Exactly.
That is a bug out, you know. It's just not the end of the world and everything was fine. But it's, had we had nothing, you know, prepared, it's like you're stressed out because you have no plan. You don't really know what to do. And you make a decision in haste, and then you don't know if it was the right decision until hindsight. But, you know, what if you make the wrong decision or you're not prepared at all, you know? So I think there's a lot to be gained from, you know, just having a simple emergency bag, just a go bag. You know, call it a bug out bag if you want, you know, call it whatever you want, but just have supplies that can take care of your needs, your family's needs on standby, and have a plan and have planned for contingencies. That's really the baseline for everyone to be more prepared for anything that comes, you know, not just this end of the world stuff, not the zombie stuff, like none of that, like the stuff that's more likely to happen to you, you know.
I definitely agree with you there. I mean, if you're traveling, even traveling from here in Salt Lake up to like Boise, Idaho, there's a whole lot of desert between here and there where there's not a lot of people. Sometimes there's not signal. So having a bug out bag, should my car break down in the middle of the night when there's not high traffic, you know, I could probably build a fire out of sagebrush. I could probably keep shelter until a car came by and could offer help or whatever need be. I'd be okay during that interim time because you have that bug. And it's not end of the world, like you said. It's maybe even 12 to 24 hours, but it's going to get you through that time a lot easier than if you didn't have it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think of the preparedness thing as more of a long-term application of survival skills. Like and of course, if you got your car, you've got a shelter, you know, depending on the weather, you may be able to heat that, just throw a sleeping bag in there, you know, maybe that's more applicable in that situation than a debris hut next to your car. You know?
Very much so, yeah.
That's all, you know, the survival triangles, the knowledge, skills, and resources, and everybody's like, you know, knowledge is the most important thing. It's like, well, it's really not. It's a combination of knowledge and skills and resources. It's a triangle. All 3 are equally important, because without the other 2, one isn't worth anything. You know, I can know everything there is to know about shelters, but if I don't have the physical skills to be able to put one together, then that knowledge is academic. You know,
I think that's what a lot of people have, is a very academic knowledge of survival, especially when it comes to, let's say, friction fire. We just did an episode with a guy who goes out and does a lot of friction fires, different woods, different things, trying them all the time. And that's one of those things, if you don't do it regularly, you can wind up in trouble, because it's really hard to make friction fire if you haven't done it in a while.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, you know, you got to have that knowledge. You have to understand how it's working, so that if it doesn't work, you can troubleshoot it. Like, you have to have that depth. Otherwise, you're just kind of doing a sideshow kind of thing out of the circus. You know, it's like, I can perform this on this particular wood with these particular conditions.
You're making a whole lot of noise and not a whole lot of effort.
It's all the mistakes that you make and the times you do it wrong that you actually learn from.
Right.
You know, you get that knowledge, you have the physical skill to do it. But if you have both of those and you don't have the resources to apply them to, then it doesn't matter. If you don't have the resources to be able to do the bow drill, it doesn't matter if you know it and can physically do it. You know, so you have to have all three. So, you know, I think
very much so.
It's another one of those industry canned answers where you just pop it open and be like, knowledge is most important. You know?
Yeah, that's definitely true. So the last question I really wanted to ask you, I'm curious about. I've been a big fan of the Alone series on History Channel for a long time. I feel like that's the closest we're going to get to a real survival challenge because they are filming it themselves. There's not like the old Survivor shows were nice, but let's be honest, it was a whole lot of setup drama and producers and cast. That was not really survival.
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever consider going out on a show like Alone, and how long do you think you'd last if you were out there?
I think I'm also a huge fan of that show. A lot of my friends have been on there, and a lot of those folks are my friends because they went on there, and I got to see who they were and how they reacted and how they were, and that kind of formed, it kind of attracted me to them, you know, for their skill set. And I think that it's the most legitimate show out there. And I think if I was to do a show that wasn't specific, and it's not that I want to be on TV, I think maybe that's why, you know, I
like if they'd invited you.
If they invited me, I think I would potentially look at it. For me, from a business perspective, going on TV is not a good idea.
There is a fair point to that.
Business aside, you know, because to me, it's let me put my business on hold to come give you a network, give you time
to be out there for that time,
give you something to put on, you know, to where you guys all make money while I put my business on hold. Then I got to come back and, you know, maybe
the other concern I always thought about is if somebody quits in 3 days and they're supposed to be a survival expert, how much is that damaging to your reputation now too? Like, it's tough to be out there for sure.
Yeah, it is.
I think Joe Robinet is one that in the first season of Alone, he quit within the first 4 or 5, maybe it was 6 days, but just because he lost his fire steel. Yeah. And now, like, he does all this stuff, and I was like, I wonder if you'd have gone back, how much of a chance you'd have at it differently now.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think he's definitely an exception. I think that I can't even say that Alone had anything to do with his success.
I don't think it did either. Like,
I think it's been very difficult for many folks that have been on that show to actually benefit from it, other than the recognition. It's been a very, very hard way to get exposed. But I think
know one guy who's really gotten great off it, and that's Zach Fowler from season 3 who won it. He's done pretty well. He
did really well on his YouTube. So I think he's got a very good mix of YouTube. Like he really kind of, I won't say he plays to what YouTube wants to see, but it's very much, he's very good at YouTube.
There's some aspect to that. That's part of it. Yeah.
He's very good at YouTube. But I think a lot of the other folks are great, and they're outstanding instructors. A lot of them are my friends, but it's a very legitimate test of skills. So if I were to do one, and, you know, all other things aside, all other things considered, that would be the one that I would do. There's no other one that I can see that I would really like to do. There could be a show that hasn't even been thought of yet that I could go on at one point, but it's really got to be a legitimate, you know, showcase or test of skills, I think.
I tend to appreciate those more. Like the setup drama, you're like, it's not really, I'm more interested to see how people survive.
Yeah, a lot of that is the flash in the pan 15 minutes of fame. And I've turned down several of those, and some of them I have to turn down on a yearly basis, which it's flattering that they want me on there, but to them it's just like, hey, this guy may have some popularity somewhere, so
it's good you have that integrity.
You know, I have no desire to be on TV, and maybe those are the ones that should be on TV.
Yeah. How long do you think you would, in a situation like that though, if you had your 10 gear, do you think you could make it, let's say, I don't know, 60 days?
I think I could. It really depends. You know, there's so many little things that can happen that you can't predict, that can take you out. I would hope that it wouldn't be something as far as fundamentally that I know better than, like cutting myself with a knife and not being able to, you know, handle that out there with what I have on hand. But I mean,
You wouldn't quit when a bear comes sniffing around your camp, huh?
Yeah, that wouldn't bother me. I got a bear sitting probably 3 feet away from me the other night, and I got him with my camera phone, and I ran out and ran him off barehanded. You know, he's been in my trash twice, but yeah, bears don't bother me. You know, the wild animals don't bother me. I've always been in the forest, you know, so I think that would be a great one. But what's interesting about Alone, and I think another reason I like it, and it's another testament to the contestants on there that last a really long time, is you think about survival, your goal is to get that over with as quickly as possible. These folks, this is reverse survival, you know.
Right. This is, they almost call it homesteading.
Yeah, they're prolonging it, you know, so all the principles that they're applying to it, you know, they're doing long-term stuff. And I've seen some people really excel out there. I've seen some people, you know, really run out of things to do to keep their mind occupied, and the psychology of survival that I'm teaching.
Notice that's taken a few people out where you're like, they seemed like they had everything going for them and everything was good, and then they just call and I'm done. I did everything I came to do, and you're like,
ran out of stuff.
How did you, what?
Yeah,
but
it's an interesting experiment, and I really enjoyed watching it. I really enjoyed watching a lot of those folks on there, especially the ones that I know, especially the ones that have gone back a second time, like Carly and Cole.
Yeah, when that redemption episode was really cool to see. I felt so bad. I think it was Carly, wasn't it, that got the fish hook in her hand?
Yep.
That was, like you said, it's those little things that can take you out, and you see what, and it was like she lasted 86 days in season 3. She was out there a long time, and then one little accident took her out, and she couldn't really take care of it.
Yeah, Carly is one of the most interesting people I know, and she actually I don't want to put her business on the street, but she had an accident recently last year, not too far from me, probably three hours from here. She was in New York and put out a message to, and like, hey, can anybody help me out? You know, she had something to do, an event in Canada to do, and I live 30-45 minutes from Canada, you know, so it's like, shoot, I'll come down and get you. You know, I got no job, I got no place to be, you know. I work in the forest.
That is one of those things about working from home that's nice. You can take that opportunity and go, yep, I can come. I'm on my way.
Yeah, so wife and I drove down, picked her up, brought her up, and got to speak, you know, got to talk to her for 3 hours, bring her up to the border and let her do her border crossing. We didn't smuggle her across or anything. Actually, somebody from Canada came down. Like, we hadn't thought about it, but as soon as she said that, I'm like, oh yeah, we'll take you over. And I went to the safe and pulled out the passports, and they had expired last year or something. I'm like, oh, okay, so I can get you to the border for sure.
That's as far as I can get you.
Yeah, we got her to the border. A guy from Canada came down, picked her up, took the rest away, and everything was fine. She's a great person, and I love to listen to her story. And you know, when I first met her, I was like, you know, you still never quit. You know,
no, she tried to do everything she could to fight that. I mean,
she still never quit. I mean, she medically had to tap out because she couldn't get it out. And like, I won't spoil it because I think you should invite her on. And
I want to invite. Yeah, we're reaching out to most people we can from there. We actually have Zach coming on the 26th, so we're super excited about that. I've known him and talked to him for a couple of years. But yeah, when I watched it, the only thing I'm like, it depends on where she has it at in her hand. Because the rule, and I've known this from watching like Old Lonesome Dove and different things like that, that if you get an arrow and you don't pull it out, it has to go through. But I mean, that takes guts to do that. And we've seen a lot of people get some very interesting injuries out there.
Yeah.
Just season 6, one of the gals constantly got injured. She cut her hand, and I thought she was done. She ended up taking care of it, and like a little while later, she did something else. Like, there were so many times I'm like, she's gonna quit. And I'm like, she's got to tap out here, but she somehow managed to hold it. I'm like, I don't know how the hell you stayed out there that long.
Yeah, she was motivated for sure, man. She was the most accident-prone contestant I'd ever seen. You know?
And a few of the contestants set their shelters on fire in that episode, in that season, and you're just like, that's brutal.
Yeah, I think even she set her shelter on fire on top of all the injuries. Got bit by a squirrel.
I think she set it on fire twice, if I remember right.
Got bit by a squirrel, I think, too.
Yeah, she didn't. That was her other injury. She hadn't killed the squirrel fully, so she was trying to wring its neck, and the squirrel bit her. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been there. I've had dog bites. That is unpleasant.
Yeah. I enjoyed watching her, but she definitely had a rough row to hoe there. But yeah. But back to Carly with her fish hook, there was no way she was ever getting that out on her own.
No.
talking to her, and she was describing it to me. Basically, that it had gone under the tendon in her thumb.
That's where I think that's what I was watching. I think she had it in the tendon, and I was like, if it's in the tendon, she's not going to get it out.
Yeah, it went basically under the tendon, and the barb stuck back into the tendon. So there was no possible way. It actually had to be surgically removed, which is a funny story that I'll let her tell you one day. But I was
that's the problem with those fish hooks. Is a fish hook with a barb, they don't like to come back out if you get that barb in you. Which they're designed to do that for the fish. But
there was nothing she could have done to get that out. It had to be surgically removed by several doctors.
About the only thing she might have been able to do to preempt it, just from me watching and remembering her gear, is she didn't have a multi-tool. So she was trying to pull the hook out by hand rather than having a multi-tool with pliers that she probably could have avoided that. But that's a gear decision. I've looked at the gear. I made a game list out of this once to have people where you give them the whole list of gear and say remove it to 10. And once you get down to about 15, it really gets to be a hard decision of what can you live without.
Yep. Yeah, it's tough. And that's an interesting part of the show too, I think, is you have your safety gear, your camera gear, and all that, but you only get 10 items and a certain amount of those 10 items, so another guy that's got an incredible story is Alan Kay. He was the first winner, and he's
right.
A great friend of mine. And he's an outstanding person, and his skill level is incredible, and that show really a lot of the folks are my friend because it was a showcase of their skills. And I'm like, I really like this guy.
I really rooted for him. I mean, he just you could tell like his mental game seemed on par. Like even when he's like quoting poetry, I'm going, who memorizes poetry and then quotes it to a camera out in the woods? But like that, I think that stuff kept him sane and kept him going. His shelter seemed to be not using a lot of like the tarps and stuff. He made a very natural looking shelter, which I like. I really can appreciate that because he's able to use the gear for other things. And I really rooted for Alan, so I was so happy when he was the guy who won it. And even I was watching it years later. I could have gone back and just seen who won it. I'm like, I got to watch this and see who actually wins and roots for it.
Yeah, there's a lot of great people on that show. So I think back to the question, if any big show that I was going to go on, it would be that one. But I'm not pursuing it kind of thing. I've got other irons in the fire.
Absolutely. And I think I was watching an interview with the guys who picked that show, and they said, like, if they do bring people out to test them, the guys who are really good and the guys who are really bad, they actually don't put on the show. So I feel like somebody of your skill level would actually have almost an unfair advantage. And so
it's possible, I think
you've done it for so long, and with your background, like they might look at you and go, he'd win. That's not even fair.
There's probably a lot of folks that are out there that are sleepers that nobody's ever heard of that may put me to shame. There's people that are living it, and like those folks you're talking about in Alaska, living off caches and their trap lines, basically. Like if I ever make it to Alaska, I'm never coming back. Like I'll go there and disappear.
That's what I tell my wife. She's like, we're never moving there. I can't get her to go to Wyoming either for the same reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I would never. I think the interesting kind of thing with me is like I wouldn't be on social media if I didn't need it for business. Like I'm a very reclusive person. Keep to myself, my family. That's really what matters to me. And I don't want much. I just want 300 acres with a 10-foot wall and guard towers and a small indigenous force.
There you go.
But
a few landmines.
Well, we don't want to bring the ATF into it because we know what they'll do.
Fair point.
Wait, we don't want to bring the ATF in. But yeah, I like being in the forest. I like hanging out with family. I like doing things outside. I'm blessed to be able to be a professional wilderness skills instructor. I refuse the term expert just because I feel like expert implies that I have nothing left to learn, and I don't believe that. I believe that everyone has something that they can learn, and you can learn from everybody as long as you're willing to. But if you're already like, I'm pretty much the biggest deal out there, kind of thing,
you'll get in trouble.
You got to have that forever student attitude. So I think that there's a lot of folks out there that I still have a lot to learn from, and I think hopefully I'll maintain that to where I want to learn until I'm done physically being able to learn, like done, just dead. Like I want to learn until I die. That's important to me. So I'm really blessed to be a professional wilderness skills guy, to be able to do this for a profession is amazing to me. And it's taken some work, and it's taken a lot of accidental things and luck, you know, to get there, I think. But I'm definitely fortunate to be able to do it.
Yeah, a little bit of fate goes a long way, that's for sure. So if people are looking for you, they can find you at the Grey Bearded Green Beret on YouTube. They can find you at thegreybeardedgreenberet.com. The movies you're doing, they're coming out mid-September, is that correct?
I think Into the Ozarks is coming out on Tuesday, August the 18th. So a couple of days.
Okay.
I just saw the trailer today. It looks great. The footage is great as usual, but like that, the preparedness film was the main thing, just like the wilderness medical film was the main thing last time. Those two are already available on the website, but the Into the series, Into the Woods and Into the Ozarks, is just, I get to travel to all these really cool places and get to film, and there's always some serious project we're working on that's a lot of work, and it's like, but I'm in the Ozarks and I'm a wilderness guy, like I'm a woodsman, like I want to be here. I want to take knowledge and skills and apply it to the resources here and just hang out and have a good time in the woods. I don't want to waste the trip on just business. So like the Into the Ozarks is me, you know, basically unwinding after filming the other film and being like, yeah, I'm just going to enjoy myself in the Ozarks, look at the resources that are here, apply some skills to it, show you some different things. That's the skills and context thing. And those are shorter films. They're more laid back. They're more entertaining, I think. There is still an educational aspect to that, but it's coming out first. Into the Woods, Into the Woods already out. Into the Ozarks is coming out on Tuesday.
Fantastic.
Website. It's available on DVD, streaming, or USB thumb drive, which is basically a download. It's just that you don't have to download it over the internet. You get a thumb drive with all the information on it.
That's handy.
Yeah, it's pretty handy, I think. And it's a really, really good seller. So those are coming out, and then September will be the first of the series for the bug out system. So that'll be coming out mid-September. But yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Josh, it's been great having you on here. We really appreciate your time and effort taken away from your very busy schedule to get us. It's a little bit of work to get you on, but we're very, very happy to have you. We want to thank all of our listeners, everybody who's watching these videos as well. Please go check out Josh and his channel. He does a fantastic job. I will continue to be a fan and a weekly watcher of things he puts out. Thank you, everybody. Please remember to keep yourself and your family safe. Have a great week, and we look forward to talking to you all next time.